Nah, so it appears to be that we have begun. Yes, another DraftScience live thing, whatever. I'm sorry, issues with my mouse. Puts me in a terrible mood when you have issues with the mouse. Anyway, yes, another DraftScience live thing, whatever. I'm sorry, issues with my mouse. Sorry, I had the volume way up because Holiday is a retard. Can't make a video at the proper volume. So, yeah, I'm going to play a little bit of a Holiday video, I guess. Respond to his bullshit. And the underlying purpose for this piece of blank paper, I have notes everywhere, is it gets down to like the formation of matter itself, you know, the mechanism of the creation of matter, because you're sort of stuck with this. Certainly things that are in material form behave, although they're made out of energy, they clearly have a behavior that is somewhat different. And I'm, going to try to bridge that gap, I suppose. I don't know what the bridge is made out of yet. I'm just saying that I know there's a gap, and I know there's a bridge. So I'll just explain how the bridge works. I know it's there. But it does get a little complicated in the realization that forces can't interfere with forces. And yet they do affect matter. And the matter technically is made of force. So then there's this little bridge of explanation of why the matter, the force in the form of matter, is able to affect force when forces can't affect forces. Simple way of saying it is everything's supposed to be made out of something, one thing, by my argument. And the one things can't affect the one things, so then how are they affecting each other? And that's what I will attempt to provide a reasonable explanation for. So anyway, let's play some of this Holiday shit. So I'm somewhere after he began his crap. Yeah. And where the hell did it go? DraftScience, that's not what I want. Invariant principles. Oh, that's it. Invariant principles of some kind of bullshit. All right, so we'll play some of this shit. So I can't see the comments right now, so I'll have to deal with those. I'll check on them periodically, see if anybody has something to say or is otherwise involved. But yeah, I can't realistically. I guess I could put two windows here. Let's see if I can. Come on, little arrow thing. Yeah, how come it's not resizing and this window will not resize? How come? Does anybody have a how come for that one? How come I can't resize the fucking window? Stupid cunt bastard fuckers. Excuse my French, but Jesus. All right, there. I have to move it. This mouse is not. The other mouse didn't work at all, so this one barely works. So I do have to. I mean, maybe it's just Windows 10 can't do mice. It can't do mice. Yeah, maybe. Sure can't do the ones I have. Because, yeah, this is not very good. It's very jittery. Anyway, we'll get to it. So I'm getting to it now. There, that might work.
Ideals. Yeah. It isn't merely a criticism he wants. The criticism will by Mendel's nature have to align and not say criticize and
well, whatever. No. Look, I've offered. So he's critiquing this offer I've made of up to $10,000 for a real name physicist. Somebody Ikaku kind of caliber, to do a real debunking. I mean, put their reputation on the line and say, look, I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to demonstrate how what you're saying can't possibly be the truth. And I'm going to provide evidence and reasoning to back that up. And it's not going to be something you're going to be able to escape from, because the facts are going to bury you. So the obligation is for them to provide a proper debunking that I can argue is worth the $10,000 I paid for it. So I'm just saying they either have to do a good job, or, but there's no other obligation. I don't care. I'm not going to have a conversation with them. I'm just going to obligate them to prove that Feynman wasn't ludicrous in comparing ultramundane particles to raindrops. That's really bad physics. Let's see somebody explain how that's not really bad physics when physicists are comparing something, described as a nuclear force as raindrops. That's, whose bad is that? And I got no mouse. This fucking son of a bitch. Still doing this shit. Let's see, how can I fix this? I just don't know. I don't know how to fix it. This mouse works great on the other computer, so this is definitely a Windows 10 issue. Let's kill that piece of shit. Anyway, so continuing.
Do certain things, and he would tantrum and say, "Oh, that's not worth £10,000. You can't have it." When you keep saying that, you're irrational, and he would dismiss everybody, and nobody would get the £10,000. And one of the things these
so
is
this is just a bitch,
because
fuck, I gotta fix this mouse thing. Let me try a different USB port. Piece of shit. Yeah, fuck you. Piece of shit, Windows, piece of shit. Maybe I'll try putting in the USB port on the keyboard. Clever, Gary. All right, now let's see if we got any action here.
amendment doesn't accept that.
Well, so again, no, they're going to get the money. I'm just saying they have to put their reputation on the line. So the point is, it's going to be paid to do a debunking. I'm just saying, then what they do, what they provide as evidence is up to them. But the point is I want somebody who has a reputation I can humiliate. There's no point if there's nothing on the line. So I'm just saying that's the only standard, is that they have to have something to lose. I mean, I would just give it to a regular physicist and say, let a regular physicist do it. But again, it has no name, so he can just do a slap-assy, half-ass job, and he's not going to give a shit that, oh, Edmundum said, made a fool out of me. Well, I want somebody I can make a fool out of.
On the other side of the fence, the physicist has a clear idea of what it means to be a theory and to criticize that theory. And just like
well, again, how do they know what it means to be a theory? There's no evidence of that. As has been pointed out, they can't even accurately describe the experiments they claim to 100% understand, which, like the two-slit experiment, clearly there's no evidence, there's not even any real evidence of black holes or any of the mechanics to create one. They don't exist in the known universe, as far as we know. There's no way to compress matter. There's no evidence that can be done. Yet they just claim these things really do exist. So I mean, theories without evidence. And again, Einstein's entire reputation, his whole career, we wouldn't even be talking, I don't think, about bent space if it wasn't for the fact that basically he got credited for a wrong prediction. He got credited as if he was right when he was wrong.
The fallacies, it's kind of a physicist science fallacy to think you have a theory because it fits. Fits isn't good enough.
Well, why don't you apply that standard to Einstein then? Okay, if fits isn't good enough, then why is bent space something talked about? Why is space, time, dimensions talked about? There's absolutely zero evidence for these things, and yet you think it's okay for that because it fits. It fits this. so therefore it's a legitimate theory. And it hasn't fit anything else. This is the only thing it fits. Nothing else. And I give you an example of a theory that fits not just this, but explains inertia, time dilation, magnetism, electricity. That's right, a real unification theory. That fits. And that's the way I'm using the word fits, and that it fits all of these circumstances, not just one circumstance. Jackass.
Fits is worthy of investigation. Fits is, you know, that's a good idea. That's interesting.
Well, again, just keep pretending I haven't said this before, but again, it's not about fitting one circumstance. It's about the fact that it would be a bizarre coincidence to come up with a wrong answer that could be applied to each one of these circumstances. Again, to have the wrong answer and be able to explain gravity, okay, you might be able to get away with one of those things. But to get the wrong answer and have it work for inertia, time dilation, magnetism, and electricity doesn't seem very probable.
I'm curious. Let's think about it further. Can we develop it into a theory? Blah blah blah. But fits is not enough.
Well, again, I'm not arguing. That's not the only evidence. The point is that it fits the evidence, jackass. It not only fits the requirement of explaining, providing explanatory information, in that it gives you an explanation of a physical reality, explains why there's attraction and why there's a repulsion, why things move into each other. It doesn't just say they magically do it because space bends and it tells them to do it. I mean, there's no bent space model that provides any engine for the bent space. It all becomes a vacuum cleaner with no fucking motor. So why don't you explain Einstein's vacuum cleaner with no motor? Why don't you explain exactly how that's possible? Take out the oxymoronic element where he's using gravity to explain gravity. So take away your right to use gravity as an explanation for why things fall in the well, and then explain why they fall in the well, please. Fuckhead.
About a proposition to call something theory.
Yeah, well, fuck
And
you.
that's what
It's not an argument.
Says is it fits everything.
It doesn't, you know, what's the point? There's just no point in having this conversation. Again, you are expecting me to provide what no physicist, no theoretical physicist provides any hard evidence for their crap. I can only say that all the existing evidence I can incorporate into what I'm arguing and explain why it makes sense. That none of it is hostile to my argument. So there's just no point, though, in this double standard. You're telling me because we have the wrong idea, and this wrong idea was first, no other idea can come along because our ears are now closed. Well, that's your problem, not my problem. You're a hypocrite and an idiot. I can't do anything for you. I mean, your double standards are obvious. You're saying the default answer is somehow a credible answer. I can explain how Einstein's theory wasn't credible, that the only thing that made him popular was actually an inverted mistake. I mean, the fact is he didn't predict that the fact of his prediction was not validated. The fact is they did the experiment badly, and he was, in fact, wrong in predicting the sun can noticeably lens light. It can't. There's no evidence that it can.
It's so beautiful, it has to be right. Well, fitting is not going to cut it in a scientific dialogue. You'd have to understand what they...
Well, whatever. That's your stupid standard. I say fitting the evidence is about the only thing you're required to do is fit all the evidence. Now, if I theorize an evolution that, well, the giraffe wants it's trying to make its neck longer or something, there can be an explanation that's a better explanation. Okay, that it's not trying, that the chromosomes are in fact in a selfish gene competition and the ones that end up with a longer neck get to win the competition because it's more conducive to survival for the animal to have a longer neck. And I can make a better explanation. I'm saying this is a better explanation than the voodoo they have now. A lot better.
I think
And that's just a fact.
counts as a theory. Now, admittedly, you know, pushing this high-end theoretical physicist, so it's somewhat detached from the old model, but
No, it's not somewhat detached, it's completely detached. So why even make this argument? You know, it's a silly argument. I mean, Einstein's contribution even to the orbit of Mercury is a minor contribution in the sense that all he's really doing is saying, oh, look, you know where he's doing this M1 plus M2 thing? That's kind of idiotic, because guess what? The gravity created by one body is different than the gravity created by the other body. So to say it's one force would be stupid, okay? It's two forces combined. And there's just no way this equation is adequate to the obligation, which is if obviously the sun's going to move just like the earth is going to move. It's just the sun is so massive that it doesn't actually change its position when its mass, its center of gravity, moves. Its center of gravity can move without us seeing the sun move at all, because it's so fucking massive.
you've got to at least begin with the old model of what it means to be a theory.
Again, there is no model demonstrating what a theory is. The theory of evolution doesn't need any math, doesn't need any bullshit. It's a rational explanation for how you get from one place to another. I'm providing a physical, rational explanation for why the Earth moves into the sun. That's it. I'm providing a rational explanation. I'm saying the nuclear bits are actually moving into the sun, not the Earth itself. I'm saying that they're getting moved because they're exchanging acceleration with a force that is imbalanced based on the fact that something else already accelerated and absorbed the force. So when something accelerates, it absorbs force and emits force from its perpendicular sides. And then when it decelerates, it does exactly the opposite, which is it consumes force from the perpendicular and releases it from the forward direction. And it's perfectly consistent with every bit of physical evidence ever gleaned from the real universe. Unlike the current theories, which are dependent on dark matter and invented crap, Huygens, that have absolutely nothing to do with anything real. Why don't you defend Huygens instead of arguing with me about my mistakes? Why don't you argue the mistakes of physics as it exists now? Colossal mistakes that don't have anything to do with reality. Completely made up, God of the gap bullshit. They fake the truth. They create a fake cartoon character to fix their fucking math, and that's all it is. And you're sitting there pointing fingers at me like I've crossed a line somewhere? Fuck you!
Current high-end theoretical physics is is kind of getting a bit silly.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. So that is physics, though, jackass. So again, I'm supposed to be held to some other standard than they are. So let's go through the whole list of all the talking heads of physics, and they're all theoretical physicists, aren't they? Aren't every single one of them a theoretical physicist? And aren't they all completely talking crap? And here you are giving me shit for what crime have I committed? Oh, I'm arguing that my theory fits all the existing evidence and provides the extra fit bonus of my theory actually fits all these different elements of physical phenomenon. So it not only fits for gravity, but it fits for the nuclear force and every other force you want to imagine. Yes, it's a unification theory that fits, that actually works, unlike every other unification theory.
Is that they're just consistent mathematical models. But, you know, in opposition to the detractors of string theory, the string theorists are adamant that in actual fact there are plenty of things which it predicts.
Again, he thinks the truth of something is its predictions. I'd say that's obviously nonsense. The truth of evolution doesn't have anything to do with predicting what the next quackaduck will look like, or a quackagator or something else. It just has to do with it's an accurate description of what we see as evidence in the world. It explains why the biology looks the way it does. It explains the process of the genetic, the sexual interactions. It explains the function of all these things. It explains why they do it and the outcomes that are produced, and it has nothing to do with predicting anything. You don't need to predict something to describe a truth. I don't need to predict what a refrigerator will do to explain how a refrigerator works.
Anyway, so that's the point. The measure of a theory, of what counts as a good theory, if you can't agree on that, then you're never going to be happy with any interaction with a physicist.
Again, I'm not asking to be happy with the interaction. I'm saying if it's there to be debunked, if it's nonsense, if it isn't a legitimate contender for a description of the truth, let them come. I'm saying I'll pay them to demonstrate that, because you people are too incompetent to do it. I'd say I'd let you jackasses do it, but you can't do it. You're not capable. You don't know enough physics to be able to do it. You keep relying on, well, somebody says, this is what the experiment says, which is a crock of shit. It's a crock of shit.
And I forget something that's found it again, but I'm totally happy with my articulation and take it as read or not, whatever. But what counts as a good theory is, well, first of all, look.
Yeah, no, the only thing that counts is whether or not it matches the evidence. There, the end, you're done. That's it.
Counts as a theory is that it's a statement which will make predictions, testable predictions, and where it's falsifiable.
Well, again, you can't falsify bent space. You can't falsify any of Einstein's relativity theory, because you can never move the speed of light to do these silly experiments that can't be done anyway. And I've clearly pointed out that given some measure of a budget, I'll do experiments that'll prove me right. Okay, there are theoretically experiments that probably can be done to indicate certain things. And one of the first experiments I'll do is we'll pay Hubble to see if it can lens this with using the sun, because frankly, it can't do it.
Counts as a good theory, or explanatory as well. As some kind of, I know we have this problem.
Yeah, duh. Yeah, it explains something. That's right. It fits the evidence. It describes why the refrigerator gets cold, because it explains the pipes and the compression and the material changes that take place when you expand and contract the volume of the liquid and blah, 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 blah. Because it explains it. I'm explaining repulsion and attraction. I'm not just pretending it's a thing it does. It's just magically delicious. Einstein is the one giving you the Keebler theory of cookie making. The elves did it. I'm giving you a solid, real, force-relevant, complete, much more complete explanation of phenomenon. Cunt. Yeah. See if there's anybody in the comments. Hey. Well, hey, D. It's not really an important comment, so I'll move along. But yes. Hardy thing and such. All right, back to business.
What is portrayed as explanatory. But yeah, it's explanatory in terms of it gives you a model, and that model for the longest while has been a mathematical model, which they're trying to get you to envisage in your mind's eye.
Yeah, well, they're not trying to get you to envision it in your mind's eye, and that's the whole problem with their mathematical models. They make their mathematical models out of obscure jargon, out of lambdas and thetas and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And they don't explain any of it. They don't explain why you're multiplying or why you're dividing, what the consequence of multiplying and dividing are, that you're really just fractionalizing or percentage something over a complete whole, And so you're basically just taking it and turning it into a decimal or a proportion. They don't explain any of it or why any of it's relevant to the equation. They don't explain why these numbers are in the equation and what their function in the equation is and why they're part of the equation. They don't do any of that. So it's, in my opinion, it's the most useless model in the world because it's basically drawing a blueprint in a language nobody speaks. So you don't know what any of the symbols mean. They don't have any description or any. There's nothing to truly understand the diagram. Their diagram is indecipherable.
Is kind of reality. But that aside, it's explanatory in terms of a model.
Well, again, it's not explanatory in terms of a model. It creates all kinds of problems. It's been pointed out. It creates infinities. It creates zeros. It nulls equations. They have to put in all kinds of gimmickry to have the equation blow up because they can't go certain places, but it comes up with the wrong answer. It has lots and lots of flaws, and none of those particulars or specifics are ever gone into in detail why that particular problem happens. I mean, with the Einstein gravity well, the obvious answer is that because, yeah, the gravity presumption is that you can make the well as deep as you want, that there's an infinite depth to the well, that it's possible to make an infinitely deep well. And there's absolutely no reason to think that that exists in reality. Just as there's Planck limits on everything else, there's a Planck limit to how much gravity you can block, how much gravity you can create, how much gravity you can generate. And they're not accounting for that in their mathematical model. Their model doesn't describe reality. It describes a synthetic fake space, and it has lots and lots of flaws because they don't catch the flaws and fix them.
You can go, oh, maybe. Now, what is a good theory and a better theory is when you take.
I'll just say, says you. I mean, obviously we fundamentally disagree on what the nature of rationality is. Okay, you have an irrational notion of reality that I can't even fathom the depth of the bullshit that you exist in. You're too stupid to concede that feelings are about the only relevant thing happening in the universe, that nothing could really be called meaningful if it didn't in some way impact the feeling thing, that feeling things are generating value by having feelings. And if they don't have the feelings, if you can't torture anything in the universe, or you couldn't cause anything in the universe to have a bad feeling, that it couldn't possibly make a difference what condition the universe was in. Couldn't possibly. And you're too stupid to figure that out. And you're going to give me instruction on what a good theory is? I don't think you're capable of understanding what a good, honest, thoughtful, sensible description of reality is. If you can't accept the reality that consciousness is fundamentally different than plastic, that plasticness and consciousness have absolutely no comparable anything. The fact that plasticness is a kind of thing and the fact that consciousness is a kind of thing in no way describes the fact that this is fundamentally different. It's just not a kind of plastic. Idiot.
To be a complex theory and simplify it down. And that model, yielded model, is thought to be better because of its simplicity. What's even better is if you can take several theories and draw them.
Yeah, right. To make them fit. But you say the word fit doesn't mean anything. So yes, you make your theory fit all the other explanations, and you tie them all together in a big fit bundle. And you just maligned fitness as meaning nothing. So again, this is just duplicity and dishonesty to play this idiotic game. It's even better if it fits. Yeah, that's right. It's even better if it fits. So 1 minute you say one thing, the next minute you say another thing. Fuck you.
Into one simple theory. And these are the terms philosophically that physicists are going to talk to you in. If you can't.
Again, it's not my limitation. First off, I'd say until we have the contest for you to presume I'm going to have some problem in the argument is nonsense. That somehow I'm not going to be able to just say, well, what do you base that on? Or as soon as they say dark matter, I'll say, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence of this synthetic thing that has properties that no matter on Earth has ever displayed, that no matter even imaginable that we could create can display, this magical invisible man features? I mean, I could have walked into the OJ trial and I just could have explained how the invisible man cut OJ's wife's head off, and it explains everything, right? It solves the entire problem. Let's just blame everything that happens on the invisible man, and we've got no problems, right? So isn't dark matter exactly that? It's the perfect invisible man. He can do anything, any crime, any problem you have, blame it on the invisible man. He did it because it's a perfect explanation for everything. Just invent things that don't exist, that can't possibly exist, and it's just like magic God. It fixes everything.
If you mend him can hold his temper and
again, my temper is irrelevant. The point is either somebody has an argument or they don't. And I'm saying I'll pay you to make a fucking argument. You either have the balls to do it or you don't. Or you know, are you just going to keep replaying 1958 Feynman clips to say this has been debunked? Well, bullshit. It hasn't been debunked.
At least begin by tackling at least those claims before you even talk of a theory about the grounds of what's going to count. You know,
again, what I don't have to redo the math that exists. So again, if that's all you people want me to do is just pretend I did math when I didn't, then fine. I'll just rewrite Newton's equation, and I'm just going to separate M1 and M2, and I'm just going to make it clear that force on the Earth is going to be different than force on the sun, because they're two different objects causing a shadow, and the shadows they each cast are of a different strength, and it would be silly to say it's one force when it's really two forces. So yes, so there, I'll redo some Newton math by just separating M1 from M2, and I'll call myself there, I've done something brilliant. No, I haven't done anything necessary to this theory. The idea is that this exists. That's all that matters. The inverse square law is the only thing that matters. Newton's equation is just this in a sloppy equation. And then Einstein's equation is just a bigger, sloppy version of that. Why don't I just say this and be done with it? Straight line force. Obvious.
What the question is that would most satisfyingly remember isn't criticize my theory, is criticize my theory insofar as that it's not mathematical and that it fits certain ideas.
Well, again, you keep saying it's not mathematical. I keep saying how it's consistent with all the existing math. I just don't give a shit. So all you can, I say, go ahead, take all of Maxwell's equations, fine, just don't apply them to light, okay? Because they apply to electrons. Maxwell's equations only apply to light when light is terminated by interaction with an electron. There is no Maxwell equation while the light is moving through space. There's only a Maxwell equation when there's an interaction. So I'm just saying there, I accept all of Maxwell's equations. I'll accept even all of Einstein's field equations. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying they're preposterously convoluted. And if we break this down into simple ideas of understanding that the whole entire function of gravity is an inductive force, that is, it's caused and then it's feedback and then it's caused and it's feedback and it's caused and it's feedback and it's caused and it's feedback. That's what it is. It's inductive. And inductive, something inductive, you can't just write a simple equation to say this is how induction works.
And talk on its potential and so on and so forth. Not really a hardcore criticism. It's quite simply not formalized enough.
Again, it doesn't need to be formalized enough because it's consistent with all the existing evidence except things like black holes, gravity waves, lensing that's all faked with dark matter, dark energy. Throw out all that crap, okay, all the misinterpretations based on their lack of understanding of redshift, their inability to understand something simple like when galaxies are turning, the suns are not moving towards the center of the galaxy, they're moving to the center of the spiral arms, quite obviously, that's the gravitational mass in a galaxy is in the spiral arms. If I add up all the spiral arms, I probably have a ton more mass than anything in the center of the galaxy. These are physicists and they can't figure this shit out. So they're not logical enough to look at a fucking galaxy and say it's not a solar system, and so I can't do the same equations I use in a solar system to define and describe how the fucking thing's working. So they're too stupid to figure that out. They're fucking supposed to be the smartest people on Earth, and it took me 10 seconds to figure out, obviously. It took me 10 seconds to figure out that a lensing argument isn't going to be very effective when you're talking about light going through this part of a galaxy compared to light going across this part of a galaxy, the flat part. So the light, when it's going this way through the thinnest part of the galaxy, it has the least likelihood of being diffracted by it or bent by it or gravitationally influenced by it. They can't even logically figure that out.
To withstand any of that rigor.
Again, I would even like the same opportunity. I mean, maybe I should pay them $10,000 to let me interrogate them on their own physics, to let me interrogate them on Huygens and dark matter and gravitational waves and the origin of them as Einstein described them as, you know, a parallel to radio waves. Having absolutely nothing to do with black holes, having nothing to do with this fucking bent space. Einstein didn't, even though Einstein invented the bent space, Einstein never connected bent space to fucking goddamn gravitational waves. No, I mean, he never had any notion that you could convert matter into bent space. Obviously, he had no notion of such a thing.
To it, I can't. There's just no way as it stands that I could, and it was a lovely idea. I thought the idea was great. The idea that everything in actual fact is.
Well, whatever. Again, this is a vacant counter argument. Your counter argument is, I thought it was a good idea, but on research based on absolutely no evidence that I'm going to give you as an argument. I'm not going to make an evidenced argument why you're wrong. I'm just going to say I've decided that I like conventional physics better, and that's all I'm going to say. I think dark matter is much more realistically true, even though it's based on absolutely no science at all, none. There's absolutely no evidence for its existence at all, except to fix broken math. In spite of that, I say, yes, I'm going with that as the truth. And I'm just going to say you're an idiot. Thank you very much. Next.
Interacting kinetically at the same speeds. I mean, you don't have to say that. You just say everything's going at the same speed. And by the existing laws of kinematics, it's Newton's laws. That's the effect is what Newton talks about, is that nothing structurally changes.
Well, again, that's not the point. The point is that it does structurally change as long as you call polarization part of the structure. Frequency is part of the structure, and the frequency has to be identified through polarization. So as long as you understand that polarization is structure, there is a structural change. It's just that the change isn't in the sense that there is more or less stuff moving. The change is that there is stuff moving in certain ways where the polarization is common. So there is more of it has a specific polarization. So polarization that was mixed in a bucket has been separated this way on either side of the bucket. That's what's changed. It's the same amount of stuff moving, the same little bits. It's just that the bits have been segregated based on polarization. Now, that's a structural change. It just isn't a momentum change. Momentum doesn't change. The impact of the momentum, the ability of the momentum to impact something has changed. Gravity doesn't impact atoms. It doesn't blow them up. But if I polarize the gravity, it will destroy the atoms. It's that kind of thing. If I intensify the polarization, then the atoms will be vulnerable to being destroyed by the same exact force, because it has polarization that will annihilate its structure. That's why radiations of certain frequencies have an effect. It's because it's based on their frequency. So frequency and polarization are significant differences. They're not momentum differences, but they're differences that matter to matter. Duh. But I've made this point. You're obviously saying that point is moot somehow based on no evidence. Bravo.
From its path. And therefore, even if properties are changing, any conglomerate of structure cannot actually form. There are just trajectories and things endlessly, essentially going on the same trajectories.
Well, like I said, I've been over this many times. I've pointed out that the key differences are the existence of polarization and frequency. It's what gives the forces their identity, is based on the frequency and the polarization. So it's just idiotic to say I haven't done that. I have done that. And so all I'm obligated to do is explain how polarization, how the subject matter, the thing in the relevant space, how the constituents of that space can be occupied by shifts in polarization. That's my obligation.
No structure can form from that. And I have, and it's not meant as a slide, but I think the theory has to be adapted, because I like the idea of it.
Yeah, well, whatever. You like the idea. I give you the it fits everything, and again, you're going to destroy it. You're going to hit it with a hammer, just like Feynman, just like Newton, just like whoever 300 years ago. You're going to make a silly argument, basically just say, well, we can't figure out how we get rid of the heat, so therefore we'll just throw out the idea, because we don't have a good enough imagination to figure out how to get rid of heat. I'm just saying, it's a minor problem that needs fixing to make it work. And the fact that you're just going to throw it out because, oh, I haven't given you this perfect explanation of how a piece of matter is formed, and therefore I can't explain why matter's a little bit different than free force energy, therefore the idea is invalid. I mean, it's just fucking stupid when, by comparison, the existing model has absolutely no coherency. None of the elements match each other. None of the explanations are at all depth. There is no explanation of repulsion and attraction. There's just a statement that things are attracted and repulsed. No explanation of how exactly that happens. No explanation of inertia and velocity. No explanation whatsoever. Just fucking God of the gaps, bent, something got bent, and therefore it's bent. Whatever that means. The bendiness did it. That's good enough for you. Bendiness does it. Fuck. In the fake dimension. Bendiness in the there's no evidence it exists dimension made it happen. It might as well just say the Martians did it.
And the interchange between velocity and mass, so, E equals mc squared. Energy.
So the mistake you're making even there is, because this theory has been explained to you, mass is velocity. Simple. Matter has things moving in all directions. Therefore, I have mass in all directions because I have things moving in all directions inside of me. So I'm essentially creating a force field in all directions around me because I have stuff moving in all directions. If I start to gain velocity, and if I'm moving really, really fast, then I end up having more of that stuff pointing in one direction. That means I will have mass in one direction, but I won't have much mass in the other directions. And if I'm going the speed of light, then I will actually have achieved having no mass in the two other dimensions, and I will only have mass in the direction that I'm moving. And that perfectly describes a photon. A photon has mass, but it only has it in one dimension, the dimension in which it's moving. Period. Simple. Mass is velocity.
And mass, that you have to convert somehow the unit step of movement into sort of think of it of a stacking arrangement, storing.
Again, I don't have to stack it or store it. The only thing I have to do is point out to you, okay, that once it's in a position condition of collection, once I can segregate based on polarization, once I can explain that filtering, that alone will explain the difference in the interaction, because we're by axiom, we're basically now have established, once we say that's theoretically possible to segregate based on this function of polarization, that I can filter for it. Once I can filter for it, then I can continually just point out how I'm filtering and filtering and filtering and filtering, and everything that's a nuance in interaction will just be because there's 2 filters, there's 3 filters, there's 4 filters, there's 5 filters. So I'm not stacking actual energy, I'm not stacking actual velocities or momentums. I'm stacking the fact that they've been a stacked filter. So the filters are being stacked, not actual matter. So once we concede the existence of the filtering mechanism, then this is simple to explain. So yes, you want me to give you the filtering mechanism, I'm working on it, but I'm saying it's nuanced. I don't think it's very hard to explain. I'm just saying I think it's going to have a 3-dimensional answer that's going to be something that's a little hard to conceptualize. So it's going to take some work to exactly figure out why forces can't affect forces in the free universe, but forces do affect forces when they're in the form of filtered matter. Once the filter exists, it exists. So the matter has the filter. You want me to explain how did the matter get filtered? Well, I don't know. There's the theory that matter can't be created or destroyed, like energy. So, you can make the argument that creating matter, synthesizing it, is a little bit complicated. Turning light into matter is the hardest part of alchemy.
Potential to move, and thus create more traditional vector kinematics, wherein things have different velocities and can have varying.
Again, where things have different velocities. They're not things, they're schools of fish. So again, the first rule of this conversation, again, is once you've decided that there is a unification, and the unification is based on a quanta, and understanding the quanta has properties, the quanta does things, the quanta is affected, the quanta is the force. The school of fish is almost irrelevant. It's a byproduct thing. So you're calling the school of fish a thing in the universe with velocity that's somehow relevant to the force. It's not relevant to the force. The force is the fish. The fish are relevant. So if you have a bunch of fish all moving the same way, that has significance to other fish. Okay? It doesn't have significance in the sense that it's not a player in what made the school move. What made the school move was the fish, not the school.
Angles, and it can yield a yield structure. In even with this property transference, structure cannot feel the Lesage force of gravity.
Well, again, this is so dishonest, because it's been a part of all of these videos for a very long time. I always keep pointing out that the difference between these different forces are this element of polarization and frequency, that the difference between one quanta and another quanta, the difference between a graviton and a photon and a magneton, and whatever, electrotron, is the fact, okay, of their particular characteristic of frequency and polarization, whether they have those functions or they don't have those functions. And those are the only the players here. So the only real players are the fact that it's moving the speed of light in a direction, has mass of 1 in that direction, the fact that it can be polarized consistent with its neighbors, the fact that it can come at a frequency. Those are the only facts relevant to the conversation. I've made that point over and over and over again, and for you to keep denying that in pure kinetics you can't somehow add a feature called polarization and say polarization is transmitted differently than kinetic momentum is idiotic, because as I'm pointing out, that's entirely what the whole thing is made out of, is the fact that it is transmittedly different. As I've pointed out, the photon that reaches us from outer space, that left an object, is not likely to be the same photon at all, because that forceton, that piece of gravity, was likely interacted with other bits of force, but the fact is the frequency was transmitted, and that's the important part. You couldn't destroy the frequency, and the only thing I've said that can destroy frequency is an electron. So again, the electron is the key player in filtering, okay, polarization and frequency. It does create and destroy these things. God. And that's the only thing I'm saying as a, oh, okay, I don't have the exact blueprint of exactly how it does that, but I'm saying that's too hard for you to imagine, that the electron has properties, and those properties enable it to convert polarization and frequency. Yes, it doesn't destroy momentum. It doesn't destroy velocity. It fucking absorbs and emits, it changes the identifier of polarization and frequency. Shit.
In this kinematic view,
I don't even know if that's a word he made up. Kinematic. Okay, no other comments. Fine. Continuing.
this pure the word's gone. Replaced it with kinematic.
Right. Well, look. The concept is simple. Okay, think of this swinging balls. Okay, and let's just pretend it's frictionless, and let's pretend it's not swinging on a rope, and let's just say this is kinetics. The two balls collide, and essentially the interaction is invisible in the sense that if they missed each other and if they hit each other, the outcome is the same. One ball goes this way, one ball goes that way. The simple argument being made here is the balls aren't balls, okay? They're frisbees. So now they can hit each other in different orientations. They can hit each other this way, or they can hit each other this way, or different angles to each other. And that the argument being made is that when that happens, in certain circumstances, which, yes, it would be good if I can explain those circumstances or detail them exactly, and I don't have the exact detailed explanation yet, but that what happens is then the polarization bounces off. So the circumstances now changed in the sense that I'm saying that if the two things hit each other in a certain polarization combination, that what will happen is this one will keep its polarization. So in a sense, it won't go through like they didn't hit. So this will be completely different than going through each other. The outcomes, the universe before and after, will be a different universe in the two circumstances because the polarization won't travel straight through. It will reflect off the interaction. That's the explanation. That's the filter. I'm saying there's a mechanism and there's rules about those kinds of interactions and exactly what angles and at what polarizations you'll get that effect. Where they won't pass through each other, they'll in fact be reflected. Is that too hard for you to understand? I've stated it. So those two outcomes are different, and you're just going to pretend I haven't stated that that's what the premise of my theory is. Shithead.
I forgot what the old word was. Kinetic. The old with the minimum kinetic model, structure can't form. The fact of
So again, he's saying this can't happen. It's not possible. There's no explanation for how structure is formed now. There's no explanation of how a proton is made, or a neutron is made, or an electron is made, or they're created. There's no, you can say quarks, but there's no explanation of where quarks come from or what engine builds them. So it's not like my theory is vacuous in some sort of major way that never in the history of physics has been encountered. It's such a vacuous explanation. Obviously, the current explanation is vacuous on that subject of exactly what this mechanism is called an atom that stores these things called energy. They give no explanation of exactly the mechanism or how it holds this energy or how it maintains it or controls it. Any at all. And yet you're telling me this new theory must explain that, or it's void. And I'm not opposed to providing your explanation. I'm just saying it is a rather nuanced element that's going to require some exactitude in trying to figure out exactly what features of a polarizing filter need to exist and how I can place those inside of an electron. Shithead. But I think I've already done that by explaining that maybe electrons are, to explain the whole color frequency thing, that it's three different orbs of force. There's a part spinning inside that's small, a part in the middle that's bigger, the yellow, and then there's the red on the outside. And that's where we get our color frequencies from, is the fact that it's moving slower on the outside than it is on the inside. Shithead.
Trajectories change, particles change a property. Well, that now in his theory is the way it goes, and it's true. But structures can still not form.
Again, structure, it's not structure in the sense that it's not new velocity or new momentum or new any of that stuff. The only thing that's changed is the fact that it comes at a frequency. Again, the only difference between visible light and gravity, by my theory, okay, is the fact that the visible light is at a frequency. That's it. It's not like it's extra force. It's not like it's more force. The thing that makes it have impact when it interacts with atoms is that it doesn't go right through it, that it doesn't just pass passively through it. It affects it, and that's the whole point here. At certain polarizations, there's an effect. At other polarizations, there's no effect. That's the argument. That's what makes magnetism work, is the fact that once you change the incident of a certain kind of polarization and you eliminate the possibility of some other kind through that mechanism, that you can magnify the effect of gravity, because you've essentially said, I'm going to throw, instead of, there's rubber knives and there's steel knives, and now I'm going to throw all steel knives at you. It's going to make it different than if I'm throwing all rubber knives at you. It's the same number of knives. It's just there is a difference between the rubber ones and the steel ones. There's a difference between polarization that you're sensitive to and polarization that you're not. That's just one of these facts. Shit. Of function.
Moreover, say you allowed structure to form by God knows what mechanism.
Again, the current model has God knows what mechanism is their answer. So again, this double standard that I somehow must meet a standard that they haven't met, when I've already met standards they haven't met, which in a sense, I've made a theory that fits everything, where they've made a theory that fits almost nothing. So let's just keep playing this idiotic game, you hypocrite. You're a fucking hypocrite. Little bourbon and root beer. Yummy.
Here that velocity will, as you approach the speed of light, disintegrate that structure. Also doesn't hold, given this.
All right, so that's the amazing one, right? I mean, that one's just amazing in the sense you're saying this, you've given you this analogy of a school of fish. And you're saying that, look, whether you like it or not, yes, there is this concept. That's what matter is, okay? And regular matter has stuff going in all directions. That's why it has mass in all directions. And then if I give it velocity, it means more of the fish are just moving one way. right? And eventually, if I make all the fish move just one way, I have created light. That's essentially what I've created, or gravity, whatever you want to call it. I've created force, and it's no longer matter, because it's converted. It no longer has dimensionality in 3 dimensions. It only has mass in 1 dimension, the dimension it's going, and that's the definition of a force. Duh. I mean, that's too complex an analogy. How is that analogy not consistent with the fact that once you've accepted the premise that matter exists, that it does exist in a form that captures orientation, polarization, that's all you need. Let's see how to captures the wrong word. So that it filters for polarization. So once you accept that this thing is capable of filtering for polarization and can only absorb one kind of polarization, and that it will absorb out of the field only elements that are moving not only in the right direction, but of the right polarization.
Kinetic model. Yeah? The properties, the polarizations, as he put it, that may change and be lost, but the structure is still going to be there.
Exactly. And that's exactly the argument. The structure is still there. There's still 1,000 fish. It's just that now the fish, the ones that are now part of the collection, the ones that have the right polarization, are now all traveling in one direction, in the sense that all the polarized fish are going in the same direction. So there's a bunch of fish going in all the other directions still moving through the thing. It's just that none of those fish are now relevant, because the thing itself is now just all polarizing. It's all just converted. Anything that's moving, a pile of stuff moving in this direction. So a pile of stuff that was moving in this direction, it's now all of the same polarization. It's all of a polarization that is consistent with its collection. So again, I can't say it's the same polarization, because a beam of light is not a ray of light. So it gets a little complicated. You'll be converted into light. The light itself is going to be made out of constituent. Light isn't even the word, right? Because it could be converted into gravity. I'm just saying the point is, when you accelerate mass, you convert it into force. That's the point. So once you've accelerated mass to the speed of light, it is now force. It returns back to force. That can be force that has an identity of polarization, or it can be force that doesn't. So again, it could be converted into gravity.
The other common objection in Mendelman's. Now, I'm usually critical of physics, don't get me wrong, but
no, you're completely wrongable. Okay, this is just gross hypocrisy. Your standards of critique are inconsistent. They're not even close to fair or equitable. The crimes you're saying I'm guilty of, they are twice as guilty of, or 10 times guilty of, or 100 times more guilty of. It's absolute nonsense to say I have violated some rule of theorizing when they have violated these rules preposterously in excess, more gratuitously and insanely and insipidly than I have in any respect that you have demonstrated or proven. I've crossed none of those lines. I haven't created any dark, fudgy matter. I haven't created fake lensing dark matter. I haven't speculated on the existence of super compressed anything, or fudgy particles that aren't real. They're virtual. I haven't done any of that, jackass. They have.
Have to understand the context of the criticisms and so on and so forth. The idea that, right, in the context,
let's just get, yeah, in the context that their entire structure is now built on these this more of their physics is this fake physics than is the real physics. The ability to find anything real in their theorizing anymore, in the mechanics of their structure, it's all a bunch of God particle crap. They've turned it all into these super particles rather than anything that would ever be tied to anything called the material universe or a physical universe. They've made a ton of non-physical elements, okay, non-physical in the sense that we have no explanation of their creation, their form, their structure, where it came from, how it exists, how it's even theoretically possible for it to exist. Nothing. So don't tell me I'm the criminal here. That they've made the center of their physics the concept of black holes, and then start talking about the writing on the side of the black hole, and then they start talking about the hologram created by the black hole. They can't even prove the black hole exists, for fuck's sake.
So what constitutes a good theory? One of the techniques that has been useful to end up with better and better theories in the aforesaid definition of what it means to be good theory has always been to introduce imaginary things.
Well, whatever. If that's you, if you think that's a good way to do science, I'm saying no. It's good to sit there and play with your model, okay? But to introduce imaginary things and then say, well, look, if I just say leprechauns push planets into the sun, haven't I solved the problem? Flying leprechauns do it. I'm just saying, if there's going to be no standard for how unconnected to reality your imaginary particles or your imaginary functions are, I'm sitting here theorizing on what are real mechanical reasons why electrons filter polarization. So I'm going to try to give you a real explanation that has real things in it, not leprechauns, not fake candy that sits there and just fills a void, an absence, a variable absence in a fucking equation. Yeah, you can't see leprechaun when they call it lambda squared. Yeah, then it doesn't look like a fucking leprechaun, but it's a fucking leprechaun. See if anybody's commenting. Some asshole. Theoretically, how would the very first electron in the universe form? Well, again, where is conventional physics explaining that to you? Where do they have anything like an explanation? Anyway. Well, multiplying electrons, I think, is kind of nonsensical. Regardless, what seems likely is that there requires to be a very high pressure environment to create electrons. So you could argue that matter is created in high pressure, whether it's inside of suns or whether it's inside of something else, who knows? But yeah, I'll give you some of that. But yeah, that could be part of the engine of their creation, is they're created inside where force collects. And force collects obviously in suns, in dense objects. Anyway, it's irritating.
I give you, is it Neptune or one of the planets, Uranus, or one of the weird gas giants? You know, there was a wobble noticed in it, and some guy predicted it, in, 200 years ago.
Yeah, right. And that seems like that was pretty intuitive by then. They'd already done that before. They'd already been there and done that. And so in a sense, it was perfectly sensible to say, look, if now we have better instruments, I can see that this is a little bit off. Let's find out why it's a little bit off. And there's probably a reason. And the reason is that, yes, if I place a gravitational body out there further, one step, if I create plant number 9, that'll solve the problem. Well, yeah, that is kind of obvious, isn't it, in a way? I mean, nothing brilliant in that, is there? So how does that equate to dark matter? I don't think it in any way does equate to dark matter, which is a synthetic, preposterous thing made out of no previous experience. There was previous experience with finding other planets and finding other moons. There was no previous experience in just inventing dark matter. There's no previous experiment with the invisible man. Where on earth is there previous experience with something like the invisible man actually committing crimes?
Paul said that wobble it's because there's a mysterious body out there pulled on it. Go look out there. He guessed, and it was there. In the Maxwell equations, there's 4 basic equations that he unites. One of them, as they
again, just to say the obvious, once there was established that stuff moves for reasons, okay, that was clearly kind of the Newtonian notion. There's a cause to the effects. So if you see an effect, there would be reason to say there's a cause. So that is kind of almost obvious induction by that time. By Newton's time, it was almost obvious because it had been so clearly demonstrated that cause and effect is rather rigid, that stuff doesn't wobble for no reason. If it's wobbling, yes, there's a cause to the wobble.
Surely unite, let's say. No. One of them, there's a natural kind of symmetry between them, except the symmetry is kind of broken. This equation is missing a term, and it makes no sense for it to have it, the term in regards of how that equation came to be. But it, through juggling it over, through the nature of capacitance and the idea that no current actually...
How could a dog understand that? Jubbly get over. I mean, it's funny, we talk to animals, but yeah, it's really like you're just saying, how the fuck, I don't know what that means. How the fuck could a dog know what jubbly give over means?
Crosses the dielectric material. And Gauss's theory about encompassing it and whatever, there becomes a bit of a problem. And Max...
Well, obviously there's no problem. Again, it's just cause and effect. So you understand that something doesn't necessarily have to be transmitted through something if the force effect is transmitted through it. So if you can vibrate a piece of metal on one side, the sound will travel through the metal and the sound will come out the other side. I mean, it's not like you understand that the sound actually moved through the thing. No, a vibration moved through the thing.
Well, introduces a term, and it's I think it's termed a virtual current. Yeah, and then he's got the symmetry.
Right, and the fact that they termed it a virtual current just means that they don't want to admit the existence of it because it doesn't fit with Einstein's bent space bullshit, because that's where the energy for gravity comes from. So they can't concede the existence of the force carrier, or the fact it's not even a force carrier, right? They call these virtual photons or virtual things, and they call them force carriers. They're not force carriers, they're fucking force. Okay, they have mass, they have velocity, they're fucking force. And they're real, and they exist in the world now. They already exist as real things, and they've just not identified them properly as gravitons.
And everything unites, and boom, the wave equation for a light, and so on and so forth, and boom. And so...
Well, again, none of the wave equations for light have anything to do with light except when it interacts with an electron. So the equations aren't applicable until the light affects an electron, and the equation is then applicable because the electron is the one capable of producing or releasing force. Photons are not. So force cannot affect force. Force can only affect matter. That's the rule, unfortunately.
It has utility, and insofar as that we still know it's a mathematical model, it has utility in that.
And again, it has utility, but you have to understand its limitations. And I'm just saying, just because photons always have to interact with electrons, there's no other way to see them except in the fact that they interact with electrons. You can't see a photon. If I'm seeing a beam of light, I'm seeing actual photons coming off the light that are actually hitting the electrons in my matter. That's how I see the photons. I can't see a photon without seeing the photon. I have to actually annihilate it. And so Maxwell's equations, although they apply them to light, have nothing to do with any light wave equation or photon wave equation. It has to do with the fact that of the wave equation of the electron. It is the electron absorbing a force, and the force has an implication. So it absorbs the momentum of the light, it gains acceleration, the acceleration causes it to release force. That's Maxwell's equation. But to draw the conclusion that Maxwell's equation is saying something about light is just plain stupid. That model is inaccurate. It's an improper use of the equation to say the equation is describing the photon. No, it's describing the reaction of the electron, for fuck's sake.
Mathematical sense. The criticisms still lie of physics that you're not really constructing a physical model, are you?
Well, they're tending to. So that's the whole point. The whole point is that they're using this piece of glue, the virtual photon, is an actually almost sensible piece of glue because it's almost tied to something real. It's not a leprechaun. It's not invisible matter. It's not fake energy. It's not magical. It's not misinterpretation of galactic movements. So this bit of fudge has some chocolate in it. This has some substance. And all they're doing is misidentifying it in the sense that they can't account for the energy of it. And if they just recognize that the energy is the same energy that's around us all the time, then it's not a problem because we're surrounded by virtual photons.
So the invention of dark matter is where I'm going, and the invention of dark energy and such.
Well, why don't you just stick with dark matter, because that's the one that is the most preposterous. I mean, although dark energy is rather preposterous also. I mean, obviously forces can be invisible, but dark matter, that's not possible. Invisible matter by its very description, okay, invisible to everything, is nonsense. The very definition of matter is that it's not invisible, that it has that you can get to it with a force.
It is not pernicious in the way
I mean, it's not pernicious to create something that creates gravity, so it creates this very impactful force, and yet you're saying it has no material structure from which to do that. It has none of the components of any baryonic matter that are required for force production. It has no elements that you can accelerate to create force, and we have no evidence that anything can create force unless it is something baryonic. So why pretend that you can sit there and perpetrate this cheat of saying there is a force being created by the invisible matter?
I've seen the way it seems like wanton abandonment of any rational sense of
it doesn't seem like it. It's by evidence demonstratable to be just made up to fix broken math. The math doesn't make sense. The math can't explain the velocity of the pieces in the galaxy because they don't understand how the galaxy works, because they've misinterpreted its function. They've compared the galaxy to a solar system when it has nothing in common with a solar system, and that the matter is completely evenly balanced on both sides. And the mass of those spiral arms is preposterously huge by comparison to the sun, to the planets. I mean, it has nothing, it has no mechanical form that's at all similar to a solar system, and yet they're applying solar system math. Isn't that the fundamental obvious mistake? And because they're going to force the solar system math to match, because they're going to use a fake contrivance to make it work. They have fake lensing images of preposterously huge lenses that don't make any kind of rational sense in places that it can't be. So they're going to contrive fake gravity to stick it in these places where they need to bend light. I mean, they're trying to defend a theory that isn't true, that you can bend light with gravity, which is wrong in the first place, and now they're going to contrive a solution to make it right. And it's fucking wrong.
You know, just making shit up just because they want it, they need it, blah blah blah. It's
not blah blah blah. They need it. That's exactly the truth. Their entire theory of reality falls apart without it. So without explaining why this isn't working, they have to make it work. It's fundamental to their theory of mechanics, so they have to make it happen. And that's the problem. They're forcing it to happen.
It's got a long history of a sensible in the theoretical.
I'm sorry, there's nothing sensible about making up the invisible man, okay? There's nothing sensible about me going to the OJ trial and proposing the theory that the invisible man did it, quite obviously. That's why there's no evidence. That's why there's no nothing. It's the invisible man did it, and he just planted the OJ blood there. Aren't we done now? I mean, it's obviously an invisible man. It's obviously so fits the circumstance. I mean, who else but the invisible man could perpetrate such a perfect, what's the word when it, setup, you know, of OJ?
Framework science, the mathematical science of being a productive thing to do.
Oh, again, productive how? Let's make up rotten physics. It doesn't make any fucking sense to fix a stupid mathematical equation based on wrong presumptions. So the wrong presumptions of how a galaxy works gravitationally, and then the wrong presumption of Einstein's unproven lensing experiment that was never proven in the first place. That was, in fact, a mistake of history that it was ever thought of to be proven to be true, because the proof is shit. It doesn't exist. They couldn't repeat the experiment, for fuck's sake. How many times does that have to be said right to your face? They couldn't repeat the fucking experiment. Isn't that evidence that the experiment might be flawed and broken and irrelevant?
I mean, the standard model seems to have been, I don't know the history of it, but when you look at the length of it and the way it's just plus this term, and this term is dealing with this, and this term is dealing with that. I mean, it seems a reasonable guess to say it's clearly been constructed in this add-on, bolt-on. Let's do this.
Yes, right. And let's assume that because we found its great-grandchild, that the great-grandfather must have existed, and we'll decide what he looked like based on what those grandchildren look like. So we'll never see the great-grandfather, but we'll assume his existence because the grandson exists. And we'll assume lots of other things about his life and what he worked as and what he did and all this other kind of crap. So yes, it's a lot of made-up bullshit to make some other thing fit. So they need an invisible man, so then they create the great-grandfather was the invisible man, and blah, 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 blah. And it's just such a pile of shit. I mean, you've got particles that last for millions of a second. They have no durability in reality, and we're saying this is a fundamental character of the material universe, or these bits that have no longevity. I'm sorry, that just sounds like absolute shit.
And now this bit is, you know, and it's produced a bit of, they say it's the best theory we have, but it is no longer beautiful. It's unwieldy, and the fact that it deals with all these fields. You know.
Yeah, well, you know, even when they play the game of the field argument, you know, then it really blows up, right? Because it's supposed to be particle physics, and they just turn into, no, we're going to describe the particle as a field, the Higgs field. I mean, what the fuck? Yeah, why don't they just give up? They're obviously not doing physics then. They're just doing, let's make up a fake field that exists from no source and pretend this is a real thing. I mean, if there is such a thing as a Higgs field, it's made of something. It's not nothing. And the something has to be produced by something. I mean, I'm giving you that. I'm giving you a material mechanism, a physical mechanism that explains things move into each other because they're essentially pushed. And pushing means they absorb acceleration from the exterior environment. The environment has extra acceleration. The extra acceleration is absorbed by the thing that accelerates. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, and it therefore moves. So you can only accelerate or decelerate things. There's no such thing as a pull. So there's obviously only a push. And pull never made any sense anyway, because pull requires you to hook. Pull requires a hook. Push doesn't. Pull requires the hook. Pull is more complicated than push by definition.
And the fact that they're not real in that sense is that those criticisms lie heavy with it. But you've got to know when you're arguing whose turf you're on, right? And you have to be clever about bringing them into.
Yeah. I'll concede there's some argument about how much bullshit people have to endure to tear down the edifice of crap. But I expect more from a physicist. So if an honest physicist is going to say he can't behave any better than a religious dogmatist, if he can't do better than that, if all he can do is preach out of his Bible, and he can't use any imagination, and he can't for a minute suspend his nonsense, just for a minute, just say, okay, I'll pretend there's no God. Now tell me about evolution. If they're not willing to do that, why should I kiss their ass in some way, or sugarcoat it, or do all this other kind of crap? I mean, to say as a pragmatist, exactly how far am I supposed to bend over and be submissive to these tyrants of archaic tradition? I mean, that's all they are. They're tyrants of archaic tradition. They have no character. They have no integrity as scientists anymore. They don't give a fuck about the truth. They just care about their system and their nonsense. Their God is more important than the truth, and that's the simple truth of it. They're heroes of science. They can't possibly find out that they all use steroids. They just won't accept the fucking truth. That's not my bad. That's their bad. And you should point out that it's their bad. The fact that fucking physics hasn't cleaned its own fucking house, that's their bad.
Your turf, you know, but you can't just say, that's crap, and you just can't do that, and that's just making up imaginary, and you've got to be very clever. When you get to that point.
Right. You can't call liars liars. You can't call propagandists propagandists. You can't call religious kooks religious kooks. I'm saying, yes, you can. And certainly in a conversation with people who are supposed to be honestly seeking the truth, you certainly can. Because if they're honestly seeking the truth, they'll defend their bullshit. They'll defend their nonsense. And I'm just saying there is no rational defense for the contrivance of dark matter. It has every bit of evidence points to the fact that it is contrived merely to fix broken math. The math is broken without it. That's why it exists. It only exists as glue. It's not at all good science. The evidence isn't leading to the conclusion. The conclusion is contriving the evidence. That's what it clearly is. I think the case can be absolutely and decisively proven, okay, beyond any reasonable question or reasonable doubt. It can be proven, okay, by the facts that that's exactly what's happening. The conclusion is driving the evidence. The evidence isn't driving the conclusions. That's the fucking truth of dark matter.
You've got to brought them on your basketball, yeah, in your court.
Well, whatever, you can say it, fine. I'm just saying there's only so much lying I'm capable of perpetrating. I'm not going to sit there and lie and pretend I think somebody's making sense when they're not. I'm not going to call them nice, wonderful people when they're lying propaganda scum. I'm not going to sit there and say you're an honest cop when you're a dishonest, motherfucking scummy cop. All right, so I just won't bend over far enough. Okay, that's my bad. I won't bend over far enough to accept their fucking, so I can stick a knife in their neck. All right, so they'll get close enough where I can kill them. I'm not going to play some seductress game and try to seduce them into my lair so I can poison them. Yeah, it's just not my tactic. My tactic is more direct. I'm going to call an asshole, okay? And until I'm proven to do that wrong or recklessly, until somebody proves where I'm wrong rampantly and excessively and all the time, and I've made more than one mistake or something, until such time as my rhetoric is actually proven to be inaccurate and excessive, I'm going to keep being inaccurate and excessive because I'm accurate and goddamn proportional. The fact is, I haven't been proven wrong. I haven't been proven wrong in my accusations I've made. And until such time as you can prove one of my accusations wrong, fuck you.
And it is whenever you argue, that's very often arguing and fighting, actually, I can say, but it's you've got to make sure that things are conducted on your terms. And
well, you just told me I have to conduct them on their terms. So again, more mishmash bullshit. Thank you very much for saying exactly the opposite.
I think anybody and everybody gets really frustrated and angry inside and stressed, usually stressed when you find yourself in the middle of their turn.
Yeah. When I find myself in a circumstance where I am perpetually and incessantly provided with what people state to be a truth. Piro does this shit all the time. It's proven. Parameciums learn. You go and look at the actual experiment. Clearly, the parameciums are not learning. Okay, clearly, when you turn the experiment upside down and it takes them twice as long to escape, then I guess they're not learning anything. It has nothing to do with learning. It has to do with some other mechanical function. While it seemed like they were learning, well, the actual facts of the experiment indicate that's not what they're doing. And I'm incessantly provided these false evidence, these false fucking bullshit to constantly debunk. I'm expected to debunk every fucking experiment ever conducted in the history of mankind that proves one of their stupid wave theories. Okay, and I've done that. I've gone to the trouble. I've debunked the two-slit experiment. I've debunked the lensing examples. Okay, I've gone to a ton of these lensing images and pointed out how the lens can't be there because it's not possible for there to be sufficient gravity to bend light. The light's not in the gravity long enough. It can't possibly happen. It's theoretical bullshit. And to sit there and place dark matter in that location, if there was dark matter there, then these suns wouldn't be moving towards this spiral arm. They'd be moving over towards that dark matter. So that doesn't make any goddamn sense. There can't possibly be heavy mass there, even if it is invisible mass, because if the mass existed there, there'd be a consequence. And the consequence is goddamn a proven fact of science, not theoretical. That truth is a fucking goddamn truth. If I place the gravity they say, if I place the dark matter where they say to put it to fix the lensing experiments, then you break the galaxy. That's the fucking truth.
And you don't know how you got there. You know you have a right, a truth in what you're saying, and because you're in the middle of the turf, you're being pointed at as ridiculous.
Yeah, because I'm asking for a fair fight, and they don't want a fair fight. And that's all it comes down to. So again, I'm not afraid of a fair fight. So show me the fair fight. I'm just saying, where's it fair for somebody to sit there and point to experiments that are fake? I mean, Piro pointed to a goddamn wave experiment with water waves. It has nothing to do with real water waves and how they behave under regular conditions. It has to do with what happens when you create a distorted wave, a wave on top of a wave that already has diffraction built right into it, an interference pattern, because the waves are no longer at the frequency the water can maintain. So what the fuck sense does this make? Why, again, if I have to constantly debunk their lies, when is it okay to say they've lied enough times about their fucking authorities, they've lied enough time, they've provided enough false evidence where I can finally say I don't have to listen to them anymore? How many times can a witness come into court, cite something as true that isn't goddamn true? How many times do I prove them wrong before we can say their opinions are useless because they're backed by nothing reliable. I'm saying you can't do that to me. You're not going to be able to do that to me because I don't make the false claims they make.
I sympathize with that, but my way has always just been to clam up in those situations. And then where it seems to be to get very aggressive with anger.
Well, it's, again, regardless of how angry I am, it has absolutely nothing to do with their ability to make an argument. And I'm just saying the quality of their argument I have demonstrated to be shit. So I'm just, there's no other thing I can say to you is that I'm fighting a fair fight. They're not. That's the truth of this circumstance. The people defending dark matter are afraid of a fair fight, and that's a fucking truth. Where have they had that argument somewhere? Show it to me. Where two physicists on different sides of that subject, and they allowed the one physicist to point out exactly what a piece of fudge this piece of shit is.
Yeah, so
I mean, I have to give the one MIT professor, the Lewin guy, a little bit of credit, because even though he was doing it derogatorily, he quoted a physicist pointing out how Huygens is a piece of shit. You might as well throw out physics if you're going to play a game like this and have make-believe waves that do make-believe things in the universe when you want them to, and then they don't when you don't want them to. This is goddamn crap. And he's basically saying, what good is physics if you're going to include this kind of shit as part of your fundamental principles? All right. So we've successfully finished the video portion of the video. So anyway, why does it ask to form out of one electron? Why does it have to form out of one electron? I don't even know what that means. Some kind of Brazil shit. I'm just going to block people who make silly comments. Is that directed at me? Seme plebes, whatever that means. Well, you people are just retarded. Oh, fuck. If I have a sealed house and I run an AC so that every room is cool, but then I turn on my computer and it makes one of the rooms hot, how do I most effectively cool the house? Can I open a window? Well, I guess the thing to do would be to find some way to try to direct the heat from the computer out a window. So yeah, if there's some way you can isolate that heat by making it go out, ventilated in some way where you're not destroying or evacuating your air conditioning, that would be the thing to do. But I mean, ideally, you put a bubble around your computer and you have that bubble connected to the outside air. Yeah, and then you got no problem. Well, if you can't ventilate, there's no way to get rid of heat. Okay, so yeah, there's no solution. Your air conditioner will have to work harder to cool your computer. Yes. Look, the air conditioner is sticking out the outside of the house for a reason. See, the whole way the air conditioner works is takes the heat from the inside of your house and throws the heat outside. You see, it can't convert the heat into something. It throws the heat outside. See, that's how it works. The heat goes outside. You have to vent. Oh, air conditioner is a ventilator, retard. Well, leaving the window open in a house that you're trying to air condition obviously isn't a great idea, because depending on whether you have the vents open on the air conditioner, so if the air conditioner is recycling the interior air and it's not pulling air from the outside, then you have some hope of getting away with that. But even so, any breeze from outside, any pressure differences on the two sides of your house, and you're going to end up putting a bunch of warm air from the outside into your house, which means it's going to have to be expelled by your air conditioner, which means your air conditioner is going to have to do more work. It's probably better not to open the window. The heat from your computer is probably less than the hot air you'll be letting in from outside, because the volume is going to be so much greater. So you're better letting your computer cool down your CPU. Put a fan in the room with the air conditioner so it will mix the air with the other room. So put a fan in the doorway to the room where the air conditioner is, on the floor or on the, up by the top of the doorway, either way, and blow the convection into the other room so the air mixes more. If you mix the air more, then you'll feel the same in the computer room as you do in the rest of the house. The reason why the computer room feels warmer is because you're next to the computer. So if you circulate the air in that room more and mix it with the rest of the air-conditioned room, then you'll feel more comfortable because you'll mix the cold air with the warmer air. But leaving the window open is kind of retarded, unless it's colder outside, which doesn't seem like you should have the air conditioner on then. Anyway, so that took a while. Yeah, an hour and 43 minutes. All right, so yeah, I haven't thought of exactly how I'm going to explain, the fact that the school that is the electron. So the electron is a school of energy. So I won't call it fish, but we'll just say it's a school of energy. And it has rules. And those rules are governed by primarily polarization, but clearly they also, the manifestation of the spherical nature of the electron, let's say, is the fact that it creates these orbitals, and that creates frequency. So it creates the frequency of light. It emits light. It creates light in the sense that it makes light identifiable by its frequency. So, and regular force doesn't seem to have any of those elements. So regular force interacting with regular force doesn't seem to be able to exchange either polarization or frequency. You can't destroy a frequency by hitting it with a force, a frequency of one of these quantons. You can't affect a graviton or a magneton. Its frequency, if it has one, by some application of an external force. You can't change its polarization. It would appear that you can't change polarization without having it interact with an electron. You have to have light travel through a substance and change the nature of the substance to change the polarization of the light. But just having a magnetic field and shooting light through it, you won't be able to change the polarization of the light. So force alone cannot affect force. So that's a rule. Force can't affect force. It would appear anyway. Like I said, it's kind of a hard thing to test, because you think of hitting two beams of light into each other. I mean, the only way you can really do that to be able to detect anything is to have it go through mirrors, and mirrors changes the equation. So, it does make it a little complicated. I mean, there's no way to have a detector to detect the light that you're shooting into other light. It just doesn't work that way. Certainly you can do it at angles, and the angles demonstrate no effect. So the assumption is that there's something about when it's in one of these, there's something about the nature of the collection that is atomic particles. So atomic structure, electron, proton, neutron kind of structure, is different than just force alone. There's something about the force when it's contained in matter that is different. Now, it doesn't have to be a big difference, but there's some kind of difference. And whether that's just an orientation in the 3 dimensions, which always complicates this, I mean, you know, Einstein's stupid example of bent space is very visual in 2 dimensions, but it's really impossible to visualize in 3. It just doesn't make any sense then, because then it turns into the vacuum cleaner. What is this more crap? You know, I mean, really, I don't want to waste my time talking about your stupid air conditioner. I also have a window AC in the front of the house, and then a room in the back, which is far from the AC. If I leave the window open in that room, it's cooler than if I close it. But I think that's because the cold air from the AC is constantly flowing outside through that window. Well, I'm just saying the fact that you create convection currents because you open a window, yes, can deceive you because you will feel a breeze, which makes something feel cooler when it necessarily might not be. So you have to use a thermometer to detect any of this shit anyway. But I'm just saying, quite obviously, if you're letting outside air in and it's warmer than the air in your house, you're not doing yourself any favors. Theoretically, how is it the very first electron in the universe formed? Well, again, see, I'm just not going to waste my time with this. I'm giving you a unification theory. No one's ever explained how the first electron gets formed. So what's the point? I'm probably not going to be able to give you that explanation. But it probably has something to do with a thermodynamic explanation. Yes, something to do with heat and pressure. That's probably how it happens. That's probably how you align things or filter things. But I don't have that on the tip of my fingers. That's what I'm trying to do at this very moment, jackass. So, I mean, asking me the question in the very video where I'm saying I'm going to attempt to start working on this problem of defining what exactly the identifying distinctive difference of this school of fish is. Why is the school different than the fish by themselves? Why do fish behave differently when they're in a school than when they're in free space? Free fish hitting free fish, nothing happens. Somehow something happens when free fish hit school of fish. And there's a reason or a rule that defines why there's that difference. But I think it just has to do with the fact that it's already formed a structure. And the fact is that it already has an identity. And that identity creates a probabilistic problem. It's like if the first number on the wheel, how to say this, if I hand you dice and they're snake eyes when I hand them to you, in a sense, I've used one of the snake eyes of probability by handing it to you in the position of snake eyes. You see what I'm saying? I've handed them to you in an initial condition, and that initial condition has an implication. So what I'm going to tend to argue here is that the very structure of the electron is really just dependent on the fact that it has an initial condition. And that initial condition was obviously created in some earlier part of the thermal history of the universe where the matter was condensated out of the force. And the initial condition is one of polarization in one direction, and that it has a tendency to keep that polarization probabilistically. It'll keep going back to it, because if I start off with it being red, you can sort of see that if I change its color to blue, that means I free red into the environment, and that means there's an extra red in the environment. You get it? So now red's going to tend to come back again because there's more red in the environment, because I ejected a red from its position and filled it with a blue. And now there's less blue in the field because the blue is stuck in there. You see? So it's going to be an argument like that where you change the probability because the pre-existing condition is always going to tend to come back because you put it back in the field. You can't, nothing's created or destroyed. So an initial condition is really important to the probability equation, because if something's already in a non-random condition, that non-randomness can't be put back into the field without weighting the field. And so the field becomes non-random as soon as you replace the non-random condition. Then the field becomes non-random. So when I take the non-randomness out of the matter, I'm just sitting there putting it into the field, and now the field has a non-random element. All right, so I'll put that in. Randomness, non-randomness is moved from matter to the field. Yeah. I think I'll remember what that means. I think I will. I think I can. I think I will. So, anyway, so yeah, we'll probably do this till 2 o'clock, and I'll give up if no one's going to show up and such. Because this part it's probably too complicated for me to talk and think it through. I mean, we got two elements. I mean, first we know that the matter is somehow, the school is somehow different than the free fish. And that one of the differences is that it has a pre-existing condition. And that pre-existing condition can't be expelled into the field without changing the condition of the field. So that makes sense. Well, again, what are you talking about? How does said electron multiply? Where's there evidence that electrons reproduce? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Who's arguing that electrons reproduce? They have sex and they have babies. They were all formed in an engine of some kind. Now, if you don't understand that a plasma that could have big banged could have been like a sun that novas, and have a similar circumstance where the sun that supernovas has a bunch of heavy elements in it because it's gotten heavier and heavier. It's created a lot of density to its mass because it's not just hydrogen and helium anymore. It's got other heavier elements inside of it. So when it explodes, it has heavier elements in it. So, I mean, but again, I don't, frankly, I've created a unification theory that explains gravity, inertia, time dilation, magnetism, and electricity. And you want me to answer this stupid question. I mean, a question that requires having solid theoretical knowledge of the construction of a universe maybe hundreds of billions of years ago. I mean, really. Fuck you. Well, there is no convection, okay, on the atomic scale at all. So on any level of atomic structure, on any fish level, there's no convection. Only schools of fish are affected by convection. And convection is field dynamics. So convection is about what stuff has in its local field. So if I radiate something, because I've changed what I am, and I radiate it into the field might duplicate my movement in some ways, and that way I'll end up still being affected by the dirt in my own local field. I'll still have to travel through the dirt I expel, so to speak. But they just become the bigger and bigger parts of the connected elements. So it's not unlike an eddy in a stream. As long as there's a dynamic connecting things, they'll be dragged along, so to speak, by movements of the field, the bigger fields. But that's all convection is just that you have byproducts of energy moving in different directions, and the sum total of that, the predominance of that, what it ends up being is it's moving in one direction more than it's moving in any other direction based on gravity usually. I mean, gravity is usually the player, or buoyancy would probably be a better way to say it. The hot stuff is more buoyant, so it rises above the cold stuff. Yeah, well, I think there's black objects. So I think there are masses that aren't on fire, but I don't think there's black holes. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to think you can compress matter. So I don't think there's any reason to believe you could create a grapefruit that has the mass of 1,000,000 suns. I think that's nonsense. I don't think there's any evidence of it. Let me put it that way. So it's just talk. It's like just saying there's an invisible man. Well, somebody can say there's an invisible man, but I don't see any evidence for invisible men. Well, from our sun, there's nothing but the Hubble except for eclipses. So you can try to find lensing when there's when the moon eclipses the sun. But for ground-based telescopes, they're all blind during the day, so you have to use the Hubble to see our sun gravitationally lens. Now, if you use a bigger object far away, a less bright object that doesn't get its light diffracted as much by the atmosphere, well then, yeah, and you're looking at night, you could probably find gravitational lensing, but none of the images they have are like that. None of the images they have are lensing around gravitational bodies. They're lensing around gravities that are very weak. They're looking inside of they're not looking at the edge of the nucleus of a galaxy or something and finding lensing there. They're finding lensing 100 million light years across the galaxy. I mean, the lens is preposterously huge, and there's no gravity there. So you can't have a lens where there's no gravity. Gravitational lenses, by definition, have to have strong gravity. That's why Einstein was saying you had to look at the sun, because he didn't even think there was anything in the universe dense enough, that's close enough for you to have visible lensing. He didn't think a galaxy could lens light. I mean, visibly, because he knew the center of the galaxy was too bright to be able to see if there was any lensing, and he knew that's where the mass was. I mean, that's where the strongest gravity is. It's nothing like our solar system, though. The galaxy's center of gravity is much lower than the sun's relative to the planets. So most of the mass in a galaxy is in the arms, the spiral arms of the galaxy. Well, conduction is that's probably the fake word. Induction is the real word. So things are induced. So there's no such thing really as a conductor. It doesn't really conduct electricity. What happens is it's able to induce an electric current. So it can feel the force. The force will push the electrons and evacuate the substance, and thereby you can give the electrons in that substance velocity. And when you give them velocity, that's the same thing as acceleration. When you accelerate them, they give off the force. And so then they give back an EMF, and you have the whole exchange and the induction of the current. And it has to be alternating because it's basically just an evacuation. When a magnetic field goes into a conductor, what it's doing is it's just pushing all the electrons out of the way. So it just comes in as like a light bulb, and think of the light as being something that pushes the electrons. So the electrons are going both ways through the conductor. They're going to the north end and to the south end. And so that's why there's no current unless you alternate. So the reason why a DC current, even though it keeps producing a force, the force can't have any effect, because once it evacuates the wire stays evacuated. So you can't build up any voltage. You can't accelerate any non-accelerated electrons. So you're just stuck with having no effect. But if you alternate it, then the electrons shoot back, and then they shoot out, and they shoot back, and they shoot out. And so then you can create a sustained acceleration and deceleration. You can't accelerate what isn't there, technically. So once you've accelerated to some electrons, that's it. You've accelerated them. They left the building, so to speak, and now you're left with nothing to accelerate. But if you move the field, then you'll keep accelerating and decelerating electrons, and you'll create a continually induced movement in the electrons. So it really doesn't have anything to do with direction. It just has to do with acceleration and deceleration. So to accelerate them, you have to slow them down so you can reaccelerate them. Then you have to slow them down so you can reaccelerate them. So it's, again, you have to stop them so you can start them, kind of a thing. Well, conduction of heat, again, is just another, on the nuclear level, you're moving force. So, there's no other real way to say it, is that you're moving polarization, technically, but that's what you're moving. And, heat is it's like I said, those are schools of fish that are moving that we're calling heat. They're blobs of movement. But the blobs mean that for the school to move, more fish have to go into the school. So anytime you're moving a school, you're changing the dynamic of the school. That means you're letting fish go in the other directions when you're acquiring fish going in the direction you're going. So you're creating more field energy when you're moving. When you change directions, how to say that? Well, there's no need to say it some other way. I mean, the schools are all surrounded by objects that are emitting force. The forces are hostile sometimes to the things. Not hostile. The thing will absorb the energy they produce. So an electron absorbs the energy produced by an electron. So an electron is emitting polarization. By giving this force off, by shining with this polarization, the other electrons absorb it and move in the direction of that force. So they're not moving away from each other technically because they're repulsed. They're actually feeding on the fish the electron is expelling. So the electron is expelling fish of just the right shape and size for another electron to say, "Oh, I like that fish, I'm going to keep it." And so the electrons are keeping the fish that their shutter is producing, which means they move away from each other, because obviously the fish they're producing are moving away from the electron that produced it. So technically it's not a repulsive force. The two things are actually very compatible with each other, and they're so compatible that they're eating each other's poo, so to speak. Electron A eats the poo of electron B, which means that it moves in the direction that the poo was going. Oh, that's probably a good way to say it. Yes, compare electrons as poo eaters. Yeah, good concept. So that's essentially what they are. So they're not repulsed by each other. They're really eating each other's poo. And when you eat something's poo, you go in the direction the poo was going. So whatever direction the poo is going, that's the direction you go in. So the electrons always expel their poo in the outward direction, So the other electrons always go outward from that electron, because when they eat the poo, they go the way the poo was going. There. Good analogy. Oh, I like that. So I love these rooms for this reason alone. I would have never thought of that if I wasn't in this silly room answering stupid questions by idiots. Yeah. The poo eating electron. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, I like it. It's like catching, it's like submarines catching each other's torpedoes. Let's say the torpedoes didn't explode, but like submarine A shot a torpedo at submarine B, and the submarine could absorb the torpedo. And if it absorbed it, it moved in the direction the torpedo was going. Same kind of idea. A little different, but you get my drift. There's no such thing as a negative torpedo, right? It's like the electron can't shoot a torpedo at you that isn't going at you. And if it's going at you, it means it's going away from the guy who shot it at you. There's no other way to do it. You can't shoot a reverse bullet. But that is an important concept in all of this. What makes electrons sensitive to that particular kind of poo? Why do electrons eat poo? Yes. Very good. Piece by piece, coming together. I mean, if I could just take all of my notes and get all of this stuff in my head at one time. I mean, this is just this week's papers, you know, just 1 week. And all kinds of poo magic on each one of those pieces of paper. You know, it's just so much to go through. But I'm very close, I think. Very close. So we have hit the 2 o'clock hour, which is, I guess, somewhere around 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in Britain. So it should be early enough for somebody over there to show up, and way past time for somebody here to show up. So clearly no one's going to show up. So I think it's probably enough for an evening. I don't want to drag it out. I think I did what I needed to do again. I'm sort of satisfied. So until the next time, which I'll do some thinking on this. Like I said, if I come up with it, then I'll do it as soon as I come up with it. But if it's, you know, if not, then we'll wait a couple of days. But, you know, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, we'll see how it goes. See how I feel. See if I have something to say. And I will try to do some drawing tomorrow. Yep, try to expand on that. That's not quite enough. Yes. Needs more completeness. It's just one of these tough, it's a tough concept, because, you know, matter obviously has a rigidity. Matter doesn't fall apart easily. You have to do some specific kinds of tricks to get matter to fall apart. You know, the neutron trick, you know, some kind of little trick to get the matter to break. So matter isn't, its structure isn't just fish. There's something binding them. There's something, well, gravity is binding them, but, you know, beyond that, there's something, I mean, in magnetism. And maybe that's enough, like I said, but that's all polarization again. The magnetic force is just polarized. So if I explain the polarizing filter, I've got this. So again, I just have to go with, how do you create a polarizing filter? Filter. 4, polarization. That defines matter. That's the key thing. Matter filters polarization. It changes. The polarization doesn't travel through interaction. The polarization bounces off the interaction. So that's the key thing. Polarization is reflected. And if you can reflect something, then you can contain it. Once there's something that can reflect, then the thing that's reflected can be contained in a bottle of reflectors, made of reflector. Yep. Well, I don't know. I'm sick of random questions, but whatever. How does the mass of air become high or low pressure regarding the weather? Well, the pressure is the density. So substantially anyway, right? So the more moisture that's in the air, the more dense it is. So they call it low pressure, but low pressure is really high pressure. High pressure just means it rises, because it's less dense. So it's kind of deceptive, because we think of the word high meaning heavy or big or more, rather than high meaning, oh, it's buoyant. So high pressure means buoyant air. Low pressure means non-buoyant air. So the difference in pressure is a difference in the density, how much mass is in the vapor. So the vapor has a lot of moisture, it's going to be low pressure. If it's very dry, it's going to be high pressure. And temperature has to do with how much moisture it can carry. And obviously, the higher you go in the atmosphere, the more the dense objects will precipitate out as rain or something else. So again, even if it is, if it has any density, if it rises, the density will automatically be drained out of it as condensates. So it's by definition high pressure. You can't float if you're made of lead. So unless I get the lead out of your pockets, you won't float, kind of a thing. But that's the convection. It's just things being moved by buoyancy, in that they are containers that have different densities of matter in them. So if I put a jar with a piece of lead in it and I put a jar with just air in it, obviously the one with air in it will float and the one with lead in it will sink. High pressure has got dry air. Well, it's like I say, by definition, high pressure is an incorrect way to look at it. The pressure is, in fact, what's the right word to use? It's like the word is deceptive, because high pressure isn't, let's see, high pressure, it's where it's going to, not what it is. So the high pressure is a zone, and the only way you can get into the high pressure zone is to lack substance. So you don't carry water. You can't carry water to a high pressure zone. So when you're in, so to call something high pressure, it is by definition lacking the elements that would make it heavy. Let's see how else to say that. I just think it's the way they say it is wrong. Because as you go higher in the atmosphere, you're not more pressure, you're lower pressure, right? They don't call like the tip of the atmosphere a low pressure zone. They call it a high pressure zone, even though it's low on molecules. So you get it. So I think there's just a wrong, I think the labels are a little bit wrong because they have to do with elevation rather than pressure. And so it's just kind of upside down. So high pressure really means more dense and you know, I mean less dense. I mean, you definitely call it high pressure if you're in an environment like I said, where there's very few molecules. People would call that high, like space is high pressure, but it's really not, right? It's exactly the opposite. It's incredibly low pressure. So yeah, I think it's just backwards. The words are kind of broken. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, barometric pressure is basically, you can only have that in a medium. I mean, it's just a thicker medium. You increase the amount of stuff in per square inch, and you'll increase the barometric pressure. It's like thick. It's like measuring the thickness of the water or something. You know. I mean, high pressure in the ocean, right, is the bottom of the ocean. So it's like the thickest part of the ocean, you know, the most stuff on top of you kind of thing. I mean, the thickest amount of gravity. The pressure at the surface is higher because the hot air goes down. No, the hot air does not go down. So that's not right. I mean, obviously, you know, what happens in our real world is stuff travels across an uneven surface and mountains, and there's all kinds of eddies and turbulence in the atmosphere. So you can have bits of warm air that are caught between two layers of cold air, and they'll behave erratically based on being pushed by that cold air. But I mean, they're not really going down on purpose. They're being forced down because they can't break through the electron barrier between the material, the differences in the density. The differences in the density are essentially like a skin that create different substances. So it's like making a transition between two substances like glass and air. When you change the density, you essentially create a surface, and surface tension causes effects that have nothing to do with what the thing wants to do. It's being forced to do something because it can't break the surface tension. I mean, you can make things that float sink by creating enough turbulence on the surface of the water and forcing the thing down because it sticks to the water. But it's not exactly the same thing as the thing going down by itself. It didn't really sink. It was forced to submerge, you know. Well, that is bad. I mean, Dr. Quantum is just an obscenity to science. The fact that the scientific community has done nothing to undo that slop, to shame it off. You know, it really should be posted with a warning that it's just horrible science. I mean, scientists should have a petition and they should all sign it, and then they can just link it on the video and just say, look, all these scientists say this is garbage. It doesn't represent physics. It doesn't represent the truth. Dr. Quantum is a fraud. He's not really a doctor. Certainly not a doctor of physics. So anyway, thank you very much and such. So I'll puddle off. Good weather here, so it's hard to get into this crap because it's just, you know, it's my kind of weather. I felt like I should have wrote your YouTube channel on the invoice. You know, well, if I was more consistent, you know, that might be worth doing. But obviously, I do put an awful lot of different kinds of content in my videos, so they're not exactly just Dr. Quantum truth or whatever, fix that lie thing. Anyway, I'm going to try to capture these comments. Come on, YouTube, go down without capturing the whole page, please. And I will post them in the description. I mean, I'll post them in the comment section of the video. Just because sometimes I don't read the comment and then people don't even know who I'm talking to or what I'm talking to. So anyway, so I have to wait till the video is finished, of course. So I have to stay up another 10 or 15 minutes. But anyway, thank you for those who participated in some way or other, and I appreciate it mostly, except for the parts that are totally irrelevant and a waste of my time. Oh, well, anyway, thanks for trying. Yeah, whatever. I feel like I should say thank you because it's just polite, but I don't know if I really do. I'm grateful that somebody's typing something, so there, I'll say that much. It's good that somebody types something. It's not, it makes this all less of a fail, but yeah, it is disappointing. The level of participation is rather thin. Oh, I hate that peace out thing. Oh, God. Yeah. What the fuck does that even mean? Just, whatever. Love you, bro. Whatever. Anyway, till next time. There's the camera. Till next time. Such. Oh, dude. God damn. Boy, I hate that dude shit too. It's like calling me boy. Okay, later, boy. Yeah, I ain't your boy. I ain't your dude. I may be the dude, but I'm never a dude. But anyway, till next time. Such.